A prisoner.
Bedlam, just totally out of control. I've never felt so unsafe in a jail. No matter what jail I've been to, I've never felt that unsafe.
A prison officer.
They goad the prisoners. They just want to hurt the prisoners. They love it.
Two people on opposite sides of the divide. The same damning story about Parc, a men's prison in Bridgend in South Wales, run by the private security company G4S. A prison which has seen 13 deaths so far this year, a staggering rise in violent incidents, and now 4 officers being investigated for alleged serious misconduct. Michael Roberts knows the jail only too well. He was one of the first prisoners sent there just after it opened in 1997. Convicted of attempted armed robbery in 2006 and given a controversial indeterminate sentence, he's been recalled several times, spending time in a raft of jails, coming full circle back to Parc until he was finally released in May. He says it's the most terrifying prison he's been in, and not because of the prisoners.
You got staff goading prisoners, trying to make prisoners snap, so then they got an excuse to fold them up. When I say fold them up, I mean using restraints on them. People who tend to cut themselves up do bad damage to themselves, and you got staff when they're banging their doors, yeah, basically laughing at them and saying, keep banging, keep shouting, no one's listening. He should be on a hospital wing where he's going to get the help, and he's not. He's on a wing getting terrorised by staff.
And you talk about terrorising, that is quite an allegation.
Of course it is. It is terror. It's not an allegation, it's a fact. I've seen it happen.
Michael claims it is organised and it is tactical, often involving the same group of officers who like to call themselves the heavy mob.
You see them leaving the wings together, you see them all laughing and joking when they're talking. What they'll do is they'll use certain female officers, yeah, to goad the prisoners. She goes off, does what she does, and then staff come in to resolve the situation, which normally means 9 times out of 10, somebody ended up face down on the floor with their hands ripped up behind their backs. Sometimes I see certain force being used in a community, yeah, and then I see force being used in there, and I think, if I used that force out here, I'd be facing criminal allegations and criminal charges. Honest, it just doesn't make no sense to me.
Even in a year when the entire prison system is in crisis, privately run HMP Parc has been particularly troubled. It's had more deaths than any other jail so far this year. At the end of May, the prison had to call in a specialist unit after a disturbance involving 20 prisoners, and separately, violence leaving 3 inmates in hospital. And now 4 people have been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office and assault. Police say it follows reports of concern about staff conduct and a series of incidents. Was it a hard decision to leave in the end?
No, a very easy decision.
Maxine was an officer at Parc Prison until she resigned earlier this year.
The job wasn't what I wanted it to be, and it didn't allow me to help the prisoners, to rehabilitate them, and I felt like I could have been a bloody good officer.
Maxine, we've changed her name and her voice to protect her identity, had high hopes when she signed up to be a prison officer. She was shocked at how short the training was, just around 10 weeks, but says she started work full of optimism, quickly smashed by a regime she says was brutal and toxic. And she isn't talking about the prisoners either. It's some of the officers she's most concerned about.
They'd look for the challenging prisoners. If a prisoner had been, I mean, we all have bad days. If a prisoner had been rude to him on the previous day, then they were gunning for him then.
Did you see evidence that they would target individuals, that they knew who they wanted to goad?
Yeah. They would, they'd come off at the wings, onto our wing, and they'd say, oh, so-and-so, he was an arsehole last week. So they would go and they would goad that prisoner then, just so that they could bend him up, and then, or they'd love it, control and restraint in Parc. They just want to hurt the prisoners.
Maxine doesn't dispute that control and restraint has to be used, but believes, like Michael Roberts, at Parc, some officers used unnecessary force.
Sometimes you could have the smallest prisoner that didn't need 5 or 6 prison officers on him. 2 staff. They could be 2 staff to use control and restraint, and sometimes you'd have 5 or 6. They would just be over him, saying, "Oh, get his leg, get his arm, come on," and whatever. And winding the prisoners up, making them retaliate more.
I mean, the Prison Officers Association would suggest that prison officers are at risk and that they're surrounded by a lot of violence and that they have no choice.
That's rubbish. They make the risks. Sometimes the prison officers make the risks. They do. They make the situations themselves. They create the problems.
Assaults at HMP Parc almost doubled in the year to March, and according to the latest published figures, it has an assault rate significantly above the average for a jail of its type, although G4S, which runs the prison, insists things are improving. Michael Roberts says those still inside Parc tell him problems remain, and the way some officers operate is one of the biggest. What does this do to the overall culture in the prison, to the overall sense in the prison?
It makes it volatile. You've got prisoners sat there on edge. You've got prisoners who are agitated and angry towards certain members of staff. At the end of the day, they're human beings, but if you're going to treat them like dogs, eventually you will act up to your environment. And if the environment you're living in is shit, you're going to start acting like shit. Sorry for the language, but that's the reality of it.
In a statement, HMP Parc told us the majority of staff are professional and caring, but we remain committed to rooting out any wrongdoing. It said it had bolstered staff numbers, adding that the prison had strict procedures to monitor the use of force. And the safety and well-being of our prisoners is our priority.